Empire development is one of those things that can fall to the wayside. I mean, it's not called total infrastructure, so why would you give it any thought? That said, your settlements and provinces make up a vital cog in the total war machine, and if you fail to manage them correctly, it doesn't matter how good you are at battling if you have no resources to fuel your conquest. So today, let's go through how to successfully manage and develop your empire. This video is sponsored by channel partner Holy and their line of drinks powders. If you like having tasty drinks that also keep you hydrated and energized, you'll probably want to check them out. They have lines of flavors with energy drinks and caffeine-free options for all of your hydration needs. Check them out at the link below or stick around until the end of the video to learn about how you can save on your first order. So the first thing to know about when developing your regions is of course buildings. Building your regions up really depends on what you want to use them for, and this can change based on a variety of factors. If it's a region on the outskirts of your empire, then military focus won't be a bad idea, so you can reinforce before heading out and quickly build up defensive armies should an enemy faction come knocking. If it's a region in the middle of your empire, far away from any threat, then it makes more sense to build it up to focus on income and other infrastructure to support your faction in other ways. Generally, I stick with checkerboarding early on, and all this means is alternating between income and military in every direction. My first province will almost always have a military focus, since I want to get to more elite units as fast as possible. That means every settlement directly next to it will focus on income, and the other ones further out will come back to military. This works pretty well for a number of reasons. First of all, having that many early regions focusing on income will give you a lot of gold fast, which you can use to build up quite a few armies using that starting military province. Getting multiple armies on the go can be a bit of a hurdle for most factions, so rushing this quickly will let you get ahead early. Secondly, later in the game it means you're never far from being able to recruit powerful units no matter where you are in your lands. If you just keep your capital as your military province and refuse to build up any others, you'll either have to force march armies all the way back home to fill them with units, or use global recruitment, which can be extremely expensive and time consuming for almost every faction. Of course, you do have to build for the space you have in front of you. If you take a magical forest and you're not one of those factions that can easily make use of them, then just build income and leave them alone, since you won't be able to amount to much of anything. Or if you take a smaller region and you can't fill it with recruitment buildings, get the ones that you find yourself needing the most often and make do with what you've got. Ideally, you have fully built up regions with everything you need, but the Warhammer world isn't an ideal one, so make do with what you've got. On garrisons, this may be an unpopular opinion, but I would advise building them in basically every single settlement you own. Now yeah, it might sometimes be a waste of a building slot and block you from getting something else, but they do slow down factions tearing through your lands. If you leave a path with less resistance, you can bet the anti-player AI will take that path all the way through your lands, so make sure it doesn't exist and you should be golden. Whilst garrisons do almost always suck at actually keeping the settlements, at the very least they slow down hostile armies, giving you more time to react. As for resource buildings, I generally always advise building them. First of all, they're very rare and can't be built everywhere, so why not make use of them when you can? And secondly, they come with useful effects for almost every faction in the game. Most factions can make use of trade, and having more resources means more money, which will never be a bad thing. If you're one of the few factions that can't trade, like the Greenskins, then they'll either be unusable or come with other effects, making them worth the effort anyway. The only time I see them being a totally bad idea to build would be if you're doing a This Is Total War campaign or some other gimmick that means you'll never use trade. Even then, the other unique effects can come in useful even without trade, so they're very rarely a bad idea. Landmarks or unique buildings I would treat pretty much the same. These are even rarer and are normally totally unique buildings that cannot be built anywhere else. Most of the time, they also come with some very powerful and unique effects, so why wouldn't you build them? Of course, it does depend on the landmark and the goal of your game, but in general, they're always worth it. As for building prioritization, it again comes down to what's going on in the empire and the province. Let's say we're talking about a province on the front lines of your empire, and it's likely to get attacked at some point in the near future. First of all, if an enemy army is a turn away and likely to attack, don't build anything. I can't count how many times I've gone to build something only for an enemy army to wipe the settlement from the map, taking all of my gold with it. Instead, make sure you have an army there to protect it before building to save yourself the headache. As for what you should build, I'd personally rush growth and garrisons to keep that front line as protected as possible. Once that's done, then recruitment to support your armies wouldn't be a bad idea, as long as everything fits with your checkerboard that we mentioned earlier. Settlements that are more inside of your empire that are in less immediate danger, you can leave garrisons till later and instead focus on whatever the region is being built up for, whether that's recruitment or military. As for prioritizing regions, I would say your capital region should almost always get priority. You will likely be able to grow to the largest size the fastest, and absolutely should, to get to those sweet endgame military buildings. Outside of your capital, it all really comes down to what you need and where. If your faction is struggling with income, then it makes more sense to build up a few income-focused regions instead of wasting money upgrading military buildings that you can't afford to use. Conversely, if you have plenty of income but your nearest complete recruitment region is half the map away, building one up that's nearer to the action will be a great idea to keep armies much busier. It all really depends on the situation and is honestly part of the game that you really just have to learn by playing. Now, for all of this, you can enable auto building in your regions, which will hand the keys to the AI to decide what to build and when. I can't advise against this enough, with one small exception. The only time I can see this being acceptable to use is once your empire reaches critical mass and is too large to manually manage. If you're spending minutes every turn going through your 100 provinces deciding what to build, then yes, auto build will do a good enough job, and let's be honest, you don't really need to worry too much when you get to that point anyway. Just set it a focus and get back to the rest of the game. In every other scenario, you are far better off taking the time to decide what to build and having that control over your regions. Now, all this talk of building is nice, but how exactly do you pay for it? That's of course where income comes in, and while it may be a bunch of names depending on the faction, for simplicity's sake, let's just call it gold. Almost every faction in the game runs on gold, with it being needed for buildings, recruitment, upkeep, and even some research projects. Earning it is also done through a large number of methods. Your regions will normally be your primary source of income. Not only will settlement buildings provide income, buildings within those settlements will also allow you to further increase this, either with flat per turn gold or augments to the region or faction. Commandments can normally also be used to increase this even further, but are generally only really useful on your high earners to make the most of those percentage-based income buffs. Trading is the second most common way to make gold and can be one of the most lucrative in the game. If you get a massive amount of trade resources and trade partners, you can really rake in the gold to a crazy degree. It can seem quite complicated, but really, all you need access to is buildings on tradable resources and trade agreements. The more resources you have, the more gold you get from your agreements, and as long as you stay friendly with trade partners, you shouldn't ever really need to stop trading with anyone. Alongside trade, any diplomatic action you make, you can ask for gold to make an even deal. Let's say a faction really wants a non-aggression pact or military access. Instead of just giving it to them for free, click the balance deal option to automatically ask for as much gold as you can, while still passing the deal. Most of the time this will only be a few hundred gold, but occasionally you get all adds up in the end. You can also extort gold from enemies to give them peace, but always weigh this against the value of taking and owning their land, and the likelihood that they'll just attack you later anyway. Battling and armies also provide a large number of ways to earn gold. Post-battle loot is the most common option and is simply an amount of gold you gain after winning a battle. The amount varies based on what exactly you're fighting, but no matter what it is, it's a good way to gain a large amount of gold quickly, but not reliably. Raiding is another option which sees you sacrifice the stats of your army to steal gold from a foreign region. This is generally a pretty poor idea for most factions, as the gold from raiding is rarely enough to cover the cost of the army, and it's much more worthwhile to simply take the region for yourself or choose the next option. Looting and sacking fall into the same camp, where they can be sometimes worth it for some factions, but most of the time you're better off just taking the region as normal and earning money that way. Sacking and looting damage buildings and can reduce the size of the settlement, meaning you'll just need to spend money to build it back up anyway. If you need a large hit of gold or have no interest in taking that settlement, then sacking, looting, or raising are all great options. But for most factions looking to conquer new territory, it's hardly ever worth it in the long run. Missions are another option for earning gold, but are very inconsistent since you can't really control when you get missions in the vast majority of cases. Plus, if we're talking generic missions, they can come with some pretty obscure objectives that can take all of the profits out of the equation, like recruiting new lords or units. Sometimes you can get some slam dunks like the trade agreements or some other diplomatic pact, but you should always weigh the requirements against the reward to figure out if it's worth it. Lord missions are normally always worth it, as they usually come with a nice chunk of gold alongside their legendary items. I wouldn't necessarily advise going for them when you're in financial trouble, as you could easily damage your army and put yourself in an even worse situation, but later on when things are stable, they're a good choice to keep armies busy and earning. Corruption saw a rework with Warhammer 3, but it's still a fairly easy thing to manage. Your faction will have a preferred flavour of corruption, whether that's vampiric, chaotic, or none at all. Each of these flavours can increase in concentration in a region at any one time, bringing all manner of effects depending on the flavour and its relationship to your faction. If your regions are completely covered in your flavour and free from others, you should have an easy time, but this is sometimes much easier said than done. The way corruption spreads can vary from faction to faction, but in general, these are the things that you want to look out for. Most lords and some heroes will have skills they can pick up to spread their flavour wherever they go. Some will even have it baked in, so even without skills they can spread the good word. Many factions will have buildings that spread their flavour locally, or even to adjacent regions. This is not only useful for establishing and maintaining control, but also for preparing neighbouring regions for an easier invasion. Commandments can also affect corruption, but these are generally used more as a temporary solution, since as soon as you change the commandments, the levels will go back to normal. There's various abilities and mechanics that can interact with corruption, but these are the basic methods everyone can make use of. Certain types of corruption have positive and negative effects depending on their level for both your own and other factions. Untainted, which most of the good factions make use of, is simply a lack of any corruption, with no upsides aside from being protected from the many downsides of being corrupted, like low control or attrition. Vampiric corruption, used by the Vampires Council and Coast, causes attrition for any non-vampiric armies, increases the vampires' chances of raising dead units post-battle, and improves their level of control. A lack of this corruption will instead cause attrition to vampiric armies. Having a high level of any corruption will also cause it to lower the levels of all other flavors, making the region much harder to take over without first removing the source. No matter who you're playing as or what their flavor is, spreading it to any region you can should be a high priority so you can reap the benefits and inflict the penalties on everyone else. And one last note, I did consider making a section about control, but it's really that easy to manage. Just keep it above 0 and you'll be fine. The effects at high tiers are nice but not needed in most cases, so don't worry about it. Keeping high control is as easy as building the occasional building, making sure your corruption flavor is dominant, and keeping enemy lords and heroes out of your lands. And that's everything you need to know to successfully manage and develop your empire in Total War Warhammer 3. Let me know any questions you have in the comments below and I'll do my best to help you out. Like, subscribe, and become a member to support the channel and see yourself in the credits. Thank you very much for watching, and thanks to Holy Energy for partnering with the channel. I get it, you've probably seen a bunch of different drinks powders, so why should you give Holy a try? Well, Holy is the first one that you can drink with a totally clear conscience. All of their drinks are 100% sugar and taurine free and only 20 calories per serving. I know what you're thinking, they probably taste like Dookie then. If you're thinking that, I'm sorry to say, but you're just plain wrong. All of their drinks use only natural colours and flavours and compromise nothing on taste. My favourite so far is Raspberry Raptor, but if you want to try them all and choose for yourself, they also have their starter sets so you can try the range and pick a favourite. Holy Energy also makes use of their new caf, which, through a bunch of science I don't really understand, slows the release of caffeine into your system, giving you a smooth supply of energy instead of a quick jolt followed by an equally quick crash. If you've got a long day ahead of you and you need help staying alert and focused, this can really do the trick. But if you're of the caffeine sensitivity type, then they also have hydrate and iced tea options which keep all the same great flavour with none of the caffeine. So if any of that sounds like something you'd be interested in, click the link below to grab a starter set and save £5 on your first order with code Colonel5 at checkout. If you enjoy it and want to come back for more, then code Colonel will get you 10% off all future orders. Not only do you get some great tasting drinks for a very reasonable price, you also help support the channel and fun videos like this. Thanks again to Holy for partnering with the channel, and thanks to you for watching if you made it all the way to the end. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.